Well, Space Coast Daily is here with Commissioner Wayne Justice, and we're going to be talking about really part of your life that not many people might know about here in Brevard, Commissioner. And could you share with us your early years? I understand your father was also a public servant in New York.
Yes, thanks. Good morning, and appreciate the chance to be here and talk to you. My dad was a public health service doctor. He was one of those enlisted in the Navy at 17 and was a corpsman and got out and used his GI Bill to go to medical school and kind of pulled himself up by his bootstraps and became a physician. And he was a public health service doctor for almost 30 years.
In Staten Island, I believe, where you grew up?
He spent most of his time in Staten Island. He was the chief of urology and was at the time a huge hospital because it serviced the maritime professionals that we had in our country, as well as the Coast Guard. And so I grew up living on hospital grounds.
Yeah. Well, you clearly followed in your father's footsteps as a public servant yourself, and you went on to graduate from high school in Staten Island, and then went on to the academy.
That's correct. In retrospect, I think my dad kind of steered me that way, but the Coast Guard Academy nominated me to have an appointment, and so I took him up on that and spent 4 years in New London, Connecticut. Played a little football in a real small school, which was fun, but the rest of the time you get your bachelor's degree and study a lot of engineering, and also you go to sea in the summertime, get ready to go in the Coast Guard.
Well, you've had an incredible and diverse career, an amazing variety of jobs throughout your career. Your early life in the Coast Guard, I understand you were assigned very quickly to a very large vessel down in South Florida. Tell us about that.
Upon graduation, it goes by the number one guy gets to pick all the 200 jobs, and the number 200 guy gets to pick the 200th job. And I was about in the middle with a bunch of my friends. We all went to Boston, spent a couple of years on a big ship in Boston. Then I got the opportunity to command, at 23 years old, a 95-foot patrol boat that had 12 guys, it had a gas card, and it had a dog. And it was we tied up at West Palm Beach in Riviera Beach, Florida. My boss was down in Miami, 60 miles away, and we had 2 years of incredible operations.
Well, tell us about those operations. What was it like patrolling the waters around South Florida and Florida at that time? This
was the late 70s, early 80s, and the drug trade was really coming into its own. It was kind of, I was using the word blowing up, but marijuana was the drug of choice at the time, and it was coming up from Jamaica on big freighters, 120, 150-foot freighters, and then we get offloaded in the Bahamas and come across on sport fishermen or sailboats or any kind of boat that would take it to bring it into the South Florida. We spent time, there was 3 or 4 patrol boats, in the South Florida area. We'd take turns patrolling out there off of Lauderdale or Miami or West Palm, and we'd catch these guys coming in at night. Everybody was dark, and there was high-speed chases and rammings and machine gun fire and all kinds of pretty exciting activity out there to get these guys to stop.
And of course, people may be familiar with the Miami Vice TV show of the early 80s, and I guess once the methods became more sophisticated for people to try to smuggle in, that must have made things more challenging, I guess.
Yes, for those 2 years it was bulk marijuana, but as the 80s wore on, cocaine became more prevalent, but also the manner by which it was smuggled. Loads got smaller, they got secret compartments, they'd hide it in gas tanks or other parts of the boat. So much more sophisticated, much more challenging.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine seeing that firsthand and seeing how creative these people can be must kind of give you a bit of an insight into the challenges from this port today, what they face and how they control contraband and other things coming into this area.
Absolutely. Now you take that same philosophy and you have a container, and then the question is what is in the container, and is something illegal, illicit, is it hidden, and how do you make sure that something like that is not in there? And there's a couple of ways of doing it, and we're, of course, this port here is as secure as any port in the nation, and we make sure with our Customs and Border Protection and all of our security people here, both the Broward County Sheriffs as well as the port security people, that either that container is sealed on departure of its, wherever it originated from, it is sealed, and it stays sealed as it comes through here. And we ensure that. Or if not, we will inspect it. We've got x-ray machines, we've got various other ways of examining containers to make sure that, that what comes into this port is secure and wherever it's going to go.
And of course, incredible record you had during your career on the seas. I believe you were involved in seizing 40 different drug smuggling vessels and over 140 tons of marijuana and cocaine. That's an incredible record. Tell us about that.
Early on, as I mentioned, bulk marijuana, and we'd get 4, 5, 10 tons of marijuana on a boat at one time. As it shifted to cocaine, the last seizure I had, which was in 2000, out in the West Coast, I was on I commanded a destroyer out of San Francisco. We were down off of Colombia, Mexico, down in that area, Southeast Pacific there, and we caught a Mexican fishing vessel that had nearly 10 tons of uncut cocaine on it in one place at one time. It was a real big boat. It had it hidden. They were trying to hide it underneath in the fish hold, underneath the ice and the fish, and down in that part of it. It took us a couple of days to find it, but we did, and it was quite a seizure. Incredible.
And of course, on the human side, you were involved, I believe, in the very first capture, I guess, of a Cuban vessel out of the Mariel boat lift. Tell us about that experience.
You know, South Florida is and has always been an entry point for people trying to get into our nation from Cuba or from Haiti or from the Bahamas, and so the water border is something that we in the Coast Guard spent just as much time, whether we look for drugs or migrants. That's what we do out there. That's what the Coast Guard does, still does as we speak. I happened to be on patrol down in Key West, April 23rd, 1980. We were down there covering for one of our sister patrol boats who was having some maintenance done. We were out there and happened to pick up the first boatload of Cubans coming from Cuba when the Mariel boat lift started, and 125,000 people later, that migration was over.
Incredible. And you know, I understand you would pick up rafts. You'd pick up sometimes empty rafts, vessels with people stacked inside and desperate, obviously hungry and thirsty, and that must have been an amazing experience to have to deal with that human tragedy.
The Cubans and the Haitians both, people trying to get into our nation, Cubans tended to have makeshift rafts or even just inner tubes tied together. I can remember picking up a raft of 10 inner tubes tied together, and 3 generations of a family, grandparents, parents, and kids, in the middle of the night, out in the middle of the ocean, just hanging on to that thing. The Haitians, a little bit different. They tended to get sailboats. They had further distance to go, and they would get an old sailboat or a wooden sailboat, and they'd stack 100 people, 150, 200 people on a sailboat, just like cordwood, from the inside out. And again, you had to really want to leave to risk everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Giving you an incredible insight into how desperate some people are into emigrating or coming illegally into this country, and the challenges that we face here in Florida. That's fascinating stuff.